The small town of Willowbrook looked like something out of a Christmas postcard. Snowflakes drifted gently from the heavens, coating rooftops, streets, and tree branches in a soft white blanket. The air was crisp and cold, but the warmth of twinkling lights from the town's central square made everything feel alive with the spirit of the season. Children played in the snow, their laughter mingling with the cheerful sounds of holiday music emanating from nearby shops. The streets were lined with wreaths and garlands, and the aroma of cinnamon and gingerbread drifted from the bakery. In the heart of Willowbrook, where the cobblestone streets met the bustling holiday market, a large Christmas tree stood proudly. It was adorned with golden ribbons, red baubles, and sparkling lights that flickered in time with the soft wind. A chorus of carolers gathered around the tree, their voices blending in perfect harmony. For many, Christmas Eve in Willowbrook was the highlight of the year, a night for families to gather, reflect, and give thanks for their blessings. But for Jack Turner, it had been anything but the perfect Christmas season. A man in his mid-30s, Jack had grown up in Willowbrook but had left years ago in pursuit of a career in the city. The demands of his job and the pressures of daily life had kept him from returning for the holidays in nearly a decade. However, this year had been different. He'd received word that his mother, who had always kept the family tradition of Christmas alive, was struggling. Her health was deteriorating, and Jack knew that this Christmas could be her last. So, he had come back to Willowbrook, but it hadn't been easy. He didn't recognize the town anymore, and he wasn't sure how to reconnect with the community, or even with his own family. His mother's house was quiet, the decorations faded and dust-covered, unlike the vibrant Christmas lights and sounds that filled the town square. His father had passed away when he was just a boy, and the absence of that paternal figure weighed heavily on him. He hadn't realized how much he longed for those simpler days until now. Jack's emotional turmoil was wrapped in layers of guilt. The life he had built in the city, while successful, had cost him something far more precious, the closeness of family and the warmth of a small town. Now, as he sat by the window of his mother's home, watching the festive activity outside, he felt like a stranger in his own past. The Christmas cheer he had once taken for granted seemed foreign and distant. As the evening wore on, Jack decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He pulled on his coat, grabbed his scarf, and stepped outside into the chilly evening air. The streets were mostly quiet, save for the occasional car passing by or the murmur of laughter from homes nearby. He walked aimlessly, his footsteps crunching in the snow, reflecting on the lost time and missed moments. His mind wandered to the friends he had left behind, people like Sarah Parker, his childhood friend who had once meant the world to him. He hadn't seen her in years, but he still remembered the way she used to light up the room, especially at Christmas. Lost in thought, Jack found himself on the outskirts of the town, near the old mill, an area that had long been abandoned. The path here was barely traveled, and the darkness seemed to swallow up the flickering streetlights. He had heard rumors that the mill was haunted, but Jack didn't believe in such things. It was here, among the frozen trees and the quiet hum of wind, that he saw it, a small, weathered box, half buried in the snow. The box was old, its wooden surface scratched and faded from years of neglect. It looked out of place in the peaceful snowy scene, as if it had been waiting for someone to find it. Jack paused, curiosity tugging at him. He knelt down, brushed off the snow, and carefully lifted the box. There were no markings, no clue as to who had left it or what it might contain. His heart raced as he wondered if it might hold something important, something that could change everything. He glanced around, half expecting someone to emerge from the shadows, but the street was empty. Jack looked back at the box, his fingers trembling slightly as he prepared to open it. Little did he know, this simple act would ignite a chain of events that would shock the entire town and change the course of Christmas for Willowbrook forever. This Christmas, Jack would soon discover that the town's true spirit was far more powerful than he could have ever imagined. But first, the box had to be opened. And what lay inside would reveal more than just a forgotten object. It would uncover a mystery, a long-buried secret, and a Christmas miracle that would leave the entire town speechless. As Jack stood there, the old box in his hands, a strange sense of foreboding washed over him. He wasn't sure what had drawn him to it, but it felt important, almost as if it had been waiting for him. He brushed off the last of the snow, revealing the weathered latch. With a deep breath, he unclasped it, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on his chest. Inside the box was a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Jack carefully unwrapped it, revealing a letter, yellowed with age, and a faded photograph. The photograph was of a young girl, no more than 10, wearing a bright red coat and a wide smile. She looked remarkably like someone Jack had known many years ago, Sarah Parker. He had to blink twice to make sure his eyes weren't deceiving him. But it was unmistakable, the girl in the photo was Sarah, only much younger. The letter, written in elegant script, was dated December 24, 1942. Jack's hands shook as he read the words. To my dear family. I am sending you this letter on Christmas Eve, with a heart full of love and hope. I know the future is uncertain, but I trust that this holiday will bring you peace, and that we will all be reunited one day. If you find this letter, know that I have kept my promise to keep the spirit of Christmas alive, no matter the distance. I hope you never forget the magic of this night, and that it brings you comfort in the years to come. Jack's mind raced. Who was this letter for? Why had it been hidden away in this box for so many years? And most importantly, why was it connected to Sarah? As he stood there, the sound of footsteps approached from behind, and Jack quickly turned around, startled. He was met by Sarah herself, her breath visible in the cold air. She had been walking home from the church service, her face flushed from the cold. She stopped when she saw Jack, her eyes narrowing as they fell on the box in his hands. Jack. What are you doing here? Sarah's voice was low, almost uncertain. Jack hesitated, then held out the box. I found this, he said, his voice trailing off as he passed her the letter and photo. I think it's yours. Sarah's face went pale as she took the items from his hands, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at the photograph first, her eyes scanning the young girl's face. Then, slowly, she unfolded the letter, reading it silently. Jack watched her, the tension building between them. It was clear that this letter held some deep significance, but neither of them had any idea what it meant, at least not yet.
After what felt like an eternity, Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. My grandmother wrote this. It's from her. Jack blinked. Your grandmother?
Yes.
She passed away when I was young, but she always told me stories about the Christmases she spent here. She said there was something magical about this town, that it had a way of holding on to its secrets, even when no one was looking. Jack felt a chill creep up his spine. What do you mean? What secrets? Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide with emotion. There's something you don't know about Willowbrook, she said quietly. Something that was lost during the war. Something that was never meant to be found. My grandmother was part of it, and now it seems so are we. Before Jack could respond, a sharp voice interrupted them. What are you two doing here? They turned to see Officer Mark Richardson, the local sheriff, walking toward them, his expression stern. Mark had always been a familiar face in Willowbrook, but Jack noticed something unsettling about the way he looked at them. His gaze flickered to the box in Jack's hands, then back to Sarah, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. It's Christmas Eve, Sarah said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. We were just reminiscing. Mark stepped closer, his boots crunching on the snow. I don't want to see you two stirring up trouble, he warned. You've no business in these parts after dark. This is private property. Go home before I have to report you. Jack stood frozen, his mind reeling from the cryptic conversation. There was something strange going on, something Mark wasn't saying. But Sarah seemed to shrink back at the officer's words, a look of fear crossing her face. Let's go, Jack, she said softly, tucking the photograph and letter back into the box. We'll figure this out later. As they turned to leave, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery of the box was only the beginning of something much bigger. The holiday cheer of Willowbrook seemed suddenly distant, replaced by a chilling mystery that hung in the air. What was the secret that had been hidden for so long? And why did it seem as though everyone was so determined to keep it buried? The events of that night had already begun to stir up more than just forgotten memories. They had ignited a conflict that would shake the town, challenge the true meaning of Christmas, and force everyone to confront the secrets of their past. As the days leading up to Christmas grew shorter, the tension in Willowbrook only seemed to grow thicker. What should have been a peaceful, festive time was now tainted by a mystery that loomed over the town like a heavy fog. Jack couldn't shake the images of the letter and the photograph and the cryptic words Sarah had shared with him. His mind buzzed with questions that had no clear answers, and no matter how much he tried to push them aside, they followed him everywhere, through the quiet streets lined with Christmas lights, and even in the warmth of his mother's house, where he had hoped to find solace. The town had once felt like a place of peace, where everyone knew each other, where Christmas was about togetherness and joy. But now, everything fell off. The markets, which had been bustling with activity and the sweet sounds of carolers, seemed quieter. There was an air of unease that clung to the festive cheer, as though the holiday spirit itself was struggling to keep the darkness at bay. Jack had tried to talk to Sarah the day after their encounter near the mill, but she had become distant, avoiding his calls and declining his invitations to meet. She had been so open and eager to talk before, but now she was shutting him out. He couldn't understand why. They had both found something important, something that connected them, not just to each other, but to the past. Why wasn't she willing to work together to unravel the mystery? His frustration deepened as the days passed. Willowbrook's annual Christmas Eve festival was just around the corner, but Jack felt like a stranger at the heart of it all. He had always been the one to leave, had chosen his life in the city over the one here, with his family, with Sarah, with everything that made this town so special. And now, when it felt like Willowbrook needed him, he didn't know where he fit. The excitement he had once felt about Christmas had turned to dread, the bright lights and decorations now seeming like an illusion. On the evening before the festival, Jack found himself standing at the town square once more. The tree stood tall, a beacon of the season, surrounded by a sea of red and gold lights, but the sight did little to ease the heaviness in his chest. The festival was supposed to be a time of community, of laughter and joy, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to unravel. His mind kept returning to Sarah and the box. He had no idea what it meant, but she clearly did. Why was she avoiding him? What had Officer Mark's strange warning meant? Every step Jack took seemed to lead him back to that same wall of silence. The crisp winter air stung his face as he walked toward the bakery, hoping the familiar smells of gingerbread and mulled wine might offer some comfort. But as he neared, his eyes caught something in the window. There, standing beside the counter, was Sarah. She was talking to none other than Officer Mark Richardson. Their conversation was hushed, but Jack could sense the intensity behind their words. Mark's eyes flicked toward the door as Jack stood frozen in place, his heart hammering in his chest. For a moment, Jack considered walking away, but something deep inside told him that now, more than ever, he couldn't leave. Not without answers. He pushed open the door, the warm air of the bakery filling his lungs, and the bell above the door jingled merrily, as if mocking the storm brewing inside him. Sarah looked up, her face pale, but she didn't seem surprised to see him. In fact, there was a sense of resignation in her eyes. "Jack," she said, her voice low and tense. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Officer Mark shot Jack a hard look before turning his attention back to Sarah. "I think it's time we end this," he said firmly, his voice tight with a quiet authority. "You're only making things worse by dragging him into it." Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. "What's going on, Sarah? Why are you avoiding me? What's the secret? Why are you talking to him?" He turned to Mark, his voice rising. "What's all this about? You were there that night by the mill too. What are you hiding?" Mark didn't respond. Instead, Sarah stepped forward, holding her hands out in a calming gesture. "Jack, please. It's not what you think." He shook his head, frustration clouding his thoughts. "Then what is it?" There was a long silence. The bustling town square outside, with its festive music and laughter, seemed so far away now. Jack felt as though he had stepped into another world, a world where the warmth of Christmas had been replaced by cold secrets and fear. Sarah sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I didn't want to pull you back into this, Jack. But there's something you don't know about this town. Something my grandmother, something she didn't finish. The letter you found, it's part of a promise she made. A promise to protect something that belonged to Willowbrook, something that's been lost for generations.
Jack felt his heart race. What is it? What's so important that Mark would warn us away from it? Sarah bit her lip, her eyes flicking nervously toward Officer Mark. It's a treasure, Jack. A hidden part of Willowbrook's history, one that could change everything we know about this town. My grandmother was involved in keeping it hidden, and now, it seems someone wants to make sure it stays buried. The box, the letter, they were never meant to be found. Not now, not by us. Mark stepped in before Jack could respond. The past has a way of coming back to haunt us, he said, his voice dark. And sometimes, people will go to great lengths to keep things buried. The festive mood outside felt like a distant memory now. The glow of the Christmas lights seemed almost mocking, a reminder of a holiday meant for joy and peace, but now fraught with uncertainty. The warmth of the season had been eclipsed by the chilling realization that something darker was at play. Jack was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, and an aching desire for truth. He wasn't ready to walk away from this, not now. Whatever this secret was, whatever it meant for Willowbrook and his family, he couldn't let it slip away again. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and with Christmas Eve fast approaching, Jack realized that the resolution to this mystery would shape not just the holiday, but his own future in Willowbrook. The clock in the town square struck midnight, and the gentle snowfall picked up, turning the streets of Willowbrook into a sparkling winter wonderland. The twinkling Christmas lights, which had seemed so cheerful before, now seemed to fade in the background of the mounting tension. The conversation in the bakery had been a turning point, a moment when everything seemed to hang in the balance, with the town's secrets waiting to be unraveled. Jack stood, still in shock, as Officer Mark and Sarah exchanged tense glances. For the first time in their lives, Jack felt completely disconnected from Sarah, the girl he once knew so well, the woman he had hoped would share in the joy of the season with him. Instead, he found her wrapped in layers of fear and secrecy. And standing beside her was Officer Mark, a man he had once trusted, but now seemed like an enforcer of some unknown, hidden rule. What do you mean, Sarah? Jack asked again, his voice thick with frustration. Why didn't you tell me? You're hiding something, and I can't just walk away from this. I need to understand. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes filled with regret. I didn't want to drag you into this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it's too late. You found the box, and now, we can't ignore what it means. Jack stood frozen in place. But what is it, Sarah? What's in that box? What's this treasure you're talking about? Sarah hesitated, glancing toward Officer Mark again. He remained silent, his expression unreadable. But something shifted in the air, a slight change, like a weight lifting, though it remained unspoken. Sarah finally stepped closer to Jack, her face softening. It's not a treasure in the way you're thinking, Jack, she said quietly. It's a promise, a part of our town's history. A promise made long ago to protect something valuable, something that could change Willowbrook forever. But over time, the meaning of that promise was lost. Jack's mind raced. You're saying this is about the town's history? What does that have to do with the box? And why are you so afraid to tell me? It's not the box that's dangerous, Sarah said, her eyes welling with emotion. It's the truth. The truth about what happened here during the war. My grandmother was a part of something that was never meant to come to light. She was part of a group that protected something that, if found, would destroy the quiet peace that Willowbrook has lived in for generations. That's why Mark and others have kept people like us from talking about it. At that moment, something clicked for Jack. He remembered the stories his mother used to tell him, stories of the town during the war, of the sacrifices that had been made, the people who had left and never returned. But there had always been gaps in the history, questions his mother had never answered. And now, here was Sarah, talking about a long-buried truth, one that could change everything. Jack looked at Mark, his mind racing with the sudden realization. You've been hiding this. You and everyone in this town. You've kept this secret all these years. Mark's eyes narrowed, but before he could speak, Jack continued, the pieces falling into place. This town's history isn't just about the Christmas cheer, is it? It's about what was buried, literally and figuratively. This treasure isn't about gold or jewels. It's about the people who died for something that no one can ever forget. And now it's up to us to set things right, to let the truth come out. For a long moment, the air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint sound of carolers in the distance. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath, waiting for the next step, for someone to take charge of what had been left unresolved for so many years. Sarah finally looked up, her expression softening. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't want to burden you with this. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for the truth to come out. Jack felt a flood of emotions, anger, confusion, but also a deep sense of understanding. The Christmas season, once something he had longed for, was now a moment of reckoning. But in that moment of clarity, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just reconnecting with the town's past. He was reconnecting with something deeper, something that transcended secrets and fears. He was reconnecting with the true spirit of Christmas, the spirit of forgiveness, of giving, of redemption. As Sarah stepped back, her eyes searching his, Jack knew what he had to do. The treasure wasn't about wealth or power. It wasn't even about the lost history of the town. It was about healing. It was about forgiveness and the courage to face what had been hidden, not just by the people of Willowbrook, but by himself. I understand now, Jack said quietly. And I forgive you, Sarah. For keeping me in the dark. But we can't go on like this. We need to make this right, for everyone. For our families, for this town. Mark stepped forward, his usual stern demeanor softening just a little. You're right, Jack, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. This town has been carrying this burden for too long. It's time we let it go. We've all been afraid of the truth. But maybe it's time to stop hiding. And with those words, something miraculous happened. The weight of the town's secrets seemed to lift, if only for a moment. The festive lights around them suddenly seemed brighter, the carolers' songs clearer, as if the whole town was waiting for the final piece of the puzzle to fall into place. As the cold night air wrapped around them, Jack realized that what they had found in the box wasn't a relic of the past, it was a new beginning. The Christmas spirit had done what it always did best, it had given them the courage to face their fears, to forgive, and to let go of the burdens that had long weighed on their hearts. And with that, Jack knew that Willowbrook would never be the same. Christmas, in all its glory, was about more than just presents and lights. It was about healing old wounds, letting go of the past, and embracing the future with love, forgiveness, and hope. The true treasure of Willowbrook had finally been uncovered, not in a box, but in the hearts of those brave enough to face the truth. The days following Christmas Eve were a whirlwind of emotion for Jack. The revelation that had unfolded in the small bakery that night had not only shattered long-held secrets but also set him on a path of self-reflection and transformation. As the town of Willowbrook began to return to its festive spirit, with the snow gently falling and the town square once again full of carolers, Jack felt as though he was seeing the world with new eyes. He had come back to Willowbrook seeking answers, but what he found was far more profound. It wasn't just the town's hidden history that needed to be uncovered, it was his own heart, his own purpose. He had come to Willowbrook disillusioned and disconnected, his life in the city feeling empty despite his success. He had thought he was escaping the past, but now, standing amidst the town that had shaped him, he realized that running had never been the answer. The morning after Christmas Eve, Jack stood by the fireplace in his mother's home, watching the flames flicker and dance. The crackle of the fire was a familiar sound, but today it held new meaning. It symbolized warmth, renewal, and the promise of second chances. He hadn't been the best son, often too busy with his life elsewhere to notice his mother's growing loneliness. He hadn't been the best friend either, especially to Sarah. Their bond, once full of possibilities, had withered away under the weight of unspoken words and past misunderstandings. As Jack stood there, he thought of Sarah. Their relationship had been strained ever since he left town, but this Christmas had changed everything. She had carried the weight of the town's secret, the burden of her grandmother's promise, for so long that she had distanced herself from everyone, afraid of what the truth might do. But now, with the truth finally out, Jack could see the fear in her eyes not as a weakness, but as a sign of her strength. She had been protecting Willowbrook, protecting him, without even realizing it. Jack had never understood her reasons for keeping the truth hidden. But now, he realized it wasn't about fear or secrecy. It was about love, a love for the town, for the people she cared about, and for the history that made Willowbrook what it was. Sarah hadn't been avoiding him out of malice, but out of a deep sense of responsibility, one that made her put the town's well-being above all else. Jack finally understood the depth of her devotion, and that realization filled him with a newfound admiration. The day after Christmas, Jack walked to Sarah's house. His heart raced as he approached her doorstep, unsure of what to say, but knowing he couldn't leave things unresolved. As he knocked, Sarah opened the door with a quiet smile. Her eyes were tired, but there was something lighter in them now, something that hadn't been there before. "Jack," she greeted softly, stepping aside to let him in. "I've been thinking a lot," Jack said, his voice sincere. "About everything, about what we discovered, about you. And I want to apologize. I didn't understand before why you kept all this from me, but now I see it wasn't about hiding the truth. It was about protecting it." Sarah's eyes softened, and she motioned for him to sit. "I didn't want to hurt you, Jack. I thought that if I kept everything buried, it would keep us safe. But I see now that secrets only tear us apart." Jack nodded. "I should have been there for you. I should have listened. You were carrying all of this on your own, and I didn't see it. I was so focused on my own life that I didn't even realize how much you were struggling." There was a long silence between them, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with understanding, a silence that spoke of healing. Jack had never truly understood Sarah until that moment, but now he did. She wasn't just a part of Willowbrook's past, she was its future, its heart. And in that realization, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Sarah, but for the town that had shaped them both. Over the next few weeks, as the last of the snow melted and the first signs of spring began to appear, Jack's perspective on life slowly transformed. He reconnected with his mother, making an effort to spend more time with her, appreciating the small moments they shared. He began to repair his relationship with Sarah, too, but this time, he didn't see it as a quest to recapture the past. Instead, it was a chance to build something new, something based on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. And Willowbrook itself began to change as well. The town's secret, once a heavy burden, was now part of its history, and with it came a sense of closure. The Christmas mystery that had cast a shadow over the community was finally resolved, and the people of Willowbrook could now embrace the true spirit of the season, one that was about more than just tradition. It was about redemption, love, and the courage to face the past in order to move forward. For Jack, it was a Christmas of awakening, a time when he realized that home wasn't just a place, it was the people, the connections, and the moments that made life meaningful. He had come back to Willowbrook searching for answers, but what he found was so much more, a chance to heal, to forgive, and to embrace the gift of love and family, all wrapped in the warmth of the Christmas spirit. As he stood in the town square one final time, watching the sun set over Willowbrook, Jack couldn't help but smile. Christmas had truly changed everything, not just for him, but for the entire town. And in that moment, he knew that he had found what he had been searching for all along, not a treasure buried in a box, but a treasure within his own heart. The transformation Jack experienced wasn't just a personal journey, it rippled through Willowbrook, affecting the lives of everyone around him. The revelation of the town's hidden history, the healing of old wounds, and the spirit of forgiveness that had emerged from the depths of the past created a wave of change that reached far beyond Jack and Sarah. As Jack reconnected with his own sense of purpose, he began to see how much the town had shifted over the years. Willowbrook had long been a tight-knit community, bound by tradition, but those traditions had grown stale, weighed down by unspoken secrets and resentments. The events that unfolded over the Christmas season, however, served as a catalyst for something deeper, something that would inspire a sense of unity and renewal. The first signs of change were subtle but meaningful. For years, Sarah had carried the burden of her grandmother's promise alone, but once the truth was revealed, it was no longer just her responsibility. The townspeople, once hesitant to discuss the town's history or its hidden truths, began to open up. Conversations about the past no longer felt taboo. People who had once kept to themselves started to share their stories. Old friendships were rekindled, and families, once fractured by misunderstandings and forgotten promises, began to heal. One of the first to reach out was Mrs. Harper, the elderly widow who lived on the corner of Maple Street. Mrs. Harper had been a friend of Jack's mother for years, but the two women had grown apart after the passing of Jack's father. The grief had kept them distant, as had the lingering bitterness between the older generation of townspeople and the newer, more transient residents. But after Jack's conversation with Sarah, Mrs. Harper had decided it was time to let go of the past. One afternoon, she invited Jack to her home. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air as Mrs. Harper welcomed him in. Her once stoic face had softened, and there was a gentleness in her voice that Jack hadn't heard in years. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened here," she said, "and how we all could have done better. It's time to let go of our old grudges and start fresh. For our children. For this town." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "I never realized how much I missed this," he said, looking around her cozy living room. "Maybe we've all been so caught up in our own lives that we forgot about the people around us." Mrs. Harper nodded. "We all have our burdens, dear. But the holidays, they remind us of the importance of family, community, and kindness." It wasn't just the elderly who felt the shift. Even the younger generation, who had grown up with little understanding of the town's past, began to embrace the spirit of reconciliation. Mark, the local officer who had once been seen as a stern figure, became more approachable and understanding. The town's annual Christmas Eve celebration, which had once been a simple affair, grew in both size and meaning. More people gathered to share food, sing carols, and reflect on the town's history and the lessons they had learned. The most profound change, however, came from within the community itself. People began to treat each other with more kindness, more empathy. The once distant neighbors who never spoke to one another began helping each other in small but meaningful ways. The town's children, who had once been caught up in the consumerism of the season, began participating in local charity events, collecting toys for the less fortunate and volunteering at the town's food bank. They had learned from the adults around them that the true spirit of Christmas wasn't about what you received, but what you gave. Jack's own mother, once a quiet woman who had kept to herself, found a new sense of purpose as well. The truth about the town's past had stirred something deep inside her, and she began volunteering at the local shelter, organizing holiday meals for families in need. She and Jack spent more time together, bonding over shared memories and new traditions. It was as if the events of that Christmas had given them both a second chance, a chance to rebuild the relationships that had been strained by years of neglect. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of the holiday spirit continued to spread. A sense of warmth and togetherness took root in Willowbrook, and it was all because the people who had been part of the town's past and present had learned to let go of their secrets and fears. They embraced the power of kindness, of community, and of love. They understood that the holiday season was more than just a time for presents and decorations, it was a time for healing, for coming together, and for rediscovering the beauty of human connection. Jack's transformation had been the spark, but it was the collective spirit of the town that carried the flame. It wasn't just one person who had learned the value of kindness and forgiveness, it was the whole community. And as the town entered the new year, there was a renewed sense of hope in the air. Willowbrook had been forever changed, not by a treasure found in a box, but by the simple yet powerful acts of love, generosity, and understanding that had been passed from one person to the next. The town had learned the true meaning of Christmas, not just through the decorations or the gifts, but through the way they cared for one another. And in that spirit of togetherness, they knew that no secret, no burden, and no fear could ever undo the power of community. The town square of Willowbrook was blanketed in snow, the festive lights twinkling like stars in the crisp December night. The scent of hot cocoa and cinnamon drifted from the nearby market stalls, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. People were gathered around, their faces filled with anticipation, but it was clear that tonight wasn't just about celebrating Christmas, it was about resolution. Jack stood near the edge of the crowd, his eyes searching for Sarah. After everything that had happened, the secrets uncovered, the town's hidden past, and the emotional roller coaster that had followed, he knew that tonight would either mark the beginning of a new chapter or the end of something precious. He had found the courage to face his own past and to forgive, but he still didn't know if Sarah would forgive him. It had been a week since their conversation in her house, a week of rebuilding trust, of understanding the weight of the town's history, and of facing the consequences of their shared mistakes. But there was one final step, the Christmas Eve gathering, where the town would come together to symbolically let go of its secrets and embrace the truth. Sarah was standing near the base of the large Christmas tree, speaking with Mrs. Harper and a few others from the community. She looked beautiful in her coat, the soft glow of the lights reflecting in her eyes. But there was something different about her now, a sense of peace, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. Jack's heart skipped a beat when their eyes met. He saw the uncertainty in Sarah's expression, but also something else, hope. Suddenly, the sound of bells filled the air, signaling the start of the ceremony. The mayor stepped forward, holding a small wooden box in his hands, the same box that had caused so much turmoil just a week ago. The crowd fell silent as he raised the box, the snowflakes falling gently around them. Tonight, the mayor began, his voice steady, we come together as a community to put our past behind us and embrace the future. This box represents not just the secrets of our town, but the strength we've found in each other. We will bury it, and with it, our fears and regrets, so that we can move forward as one. The crowd held its breath as the mayor prepared to bury the box in the snow. But before he could take the final step, Sarah stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. Wait, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. Everyone turned to look at her. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he watched her approach the mayor. Sarah took a deep breath. This box isn't just a symbol of what we've hidden. It's a symbol of what we've learned. The truth isn't something to be buried. It's something to be shared. We've spent too long keeping secrets from each other, afraid of what the truth might do. But if we're ever going to move forward as a town, we have to face it together. There was a long pause, the only sound the soft rustling of the snow. And then, to Jack's surprise, the crowd began to murmur in agreement. People who had once feared the truth were now ready to embrace it. The mayor looked around, his expression softening. Sarah's right. It's time we let go of our past, not by burying it, but by acknowledging it and learning from it. With a slow, deliberate motion, the mayor placed the box gently on the ground, stepping back. The crowd, as one, took a step forward. It was a moment of collective release, a moment of profound unity. Jack turned to Sarah, his eyes meeting hers. In that moment, everything that had been unspoken between them was finally said without words. They didn't need to explain or justify, they only needed to be present. The bond they had once shared, now rekindled, was stronger than ever. Sarah took Jack's hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For keeping you in the dark, for not trusting you with the truth." Jack squeezed her hand, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "It's not about the past anymore, Sarah. It's about what we do now. And what we'll do together." As the clock struck midnight, the snow continued to fall, and the town of Willowbrook finally let go of the weight it had carried for so long. The truth was out, and with it came the freedom to heal, to forgive, and to embrace the future. The Christmas lights shone brighter than ever, as if the very spirit of the season had embraced them all. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising in song, their hearts lightened by the weight of the truth and the bonds they had renewed. In that moment, everything felt possible, because they had faced their fears together. And that, in the end, was the true Christmas miracle. The days that followed the Christmas Eve celebration felt like a gentle, hopeful beginning for Willowbrook. The snow, which had once symbolized isolation and cold secrets, now glistened in the sunlight as a symbol of renewal. The town, its people, and its past were no longer bound by the weight of hidden truths. They had embraced their history, acknowledged their flaws, and chosen to move forward together, stronger and more united than ever. Jack and Sarah spent the days after Christmas rekindling their friendship and working alongside the townspeople to rebuild what had been lost. They weren't in a rush to define what the future held, but they were learning to appreciate each moment they shared. Their conversations, once fraught with misunderstandings, were now filled with laughter and understanding. In that quiet and steady reconnection, they found a deeper bond that neither had expected but both needed. The town, too, had undergone a quiet transformation. The long-held distance between families was replaced with more frequent visits, shared meals, and heartfelt conversations. The spirit of Christmas lingered well beyond the decorations and gifts, it had seeped into the community's very soul, rekindling a sense of belonging, of togetherness. People who once walked past one another with averted eyes now stopped to chat, offering a warm smile or lending a hand. The most profound change was in the air itself. It was as though the very essence of kindness had found its way into every corner of the town. On New Year's Eve, as the townspeople gathered in the square to welcome the new year, Jack stood next to Sarah. He looked out over the crowd, their faces illuminated by the glow of lanterns and the faint shimmer of the distant stars. The snow had stopped falling, leaving a soft, peaceful silence in its wake. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt at home. Not just in Willowbrook, but in himself. He had learned that true home isn't about escaping the past but embracing it, learning from it, and letting it shape a better future. Christmas had shown him the magic of second chances, the healing power of forgiveness, and the boundless strength of love. As the clock struck midnight, a cheer went up from the crowd, and the fireworks exploded in the sky above. Jack squeezed Sarah's hand, a silent promise exchanged between them. The future, bright and full of possibility, stretched out before them, and in the warmth of that moment, everything felt right. Love, kindness, and the Christmas spirit were no longer just words. They had become the very foundation of Willowbrook, and, in that, Jack had found the greatest gift of all.